Hey, my name is Scott Walker. I'm 28 years old and I've been a firefighter at Station 7 for almost 5 years now. I live alone in a small gray house at the end of Maple Lane, just outside Portland. It's nothing special. One story, a little faded paint, a porch wide enough for one wooden chair, a coffee table that wobbles, and 3 pots of basil I keep forgetting to water. But it's mine. After the breakup 2 years ago, I decided I didn't need much. My ex told me I was too safe, too predictable, too ordinary. So I built a life that matched. Quiet shifts, quiet mornings, quiet evenings. I came home smelling like smoke and coffee, fixed whatever needed fixing, and tried not to let my heart get loud again. Then Violet Bennett moved in next door. She was 31, a pediatric nurse at the city hospital. Her house was cream-colored with white trim, a low wooden fence between our yards, and always a row of lavender pots on the front porch. A wind chime hung by her door that made this soft, tired sound whenever the breeze picked up. We started as neighbors the way people do, small things. She asked if I knew which bin was for recycling. I helped her change the porch light when it burned out. She brought over a Tupperware of cookies one Sunday because she made too many. I fixed her leaky backyard faucet on a Saturday afternoon when she was working a double shift. Little by little, the conversations got longer. Some nights I'd come home after a rough call, still in my turnout pants, and find her sitting on her porch with a glass of iced tea, staring at nothing. I never asked what was wrong. I just leaned on my side of the fence and told her stupid stories from the station until she laughed. I liked her laugh. It was quiet, like she was surprised it still worked. I also told myself not to like it too much. Violet remembered things. She remembered I drank my coffee black. She remembered I always forgot to turn off the garage light. She even remembered I hated mushrooms, even though I couldn't recall ever telling her. She made my house feel less empty without ever stepping inside it. That Friday afternoon, I was sitting on my porch cleaning my helmet after a long shift when she walked across the lawn carrying a warm apple pie on a ceramic plate. She wore a light blue sweater, hair pulled back like she'd done it in a hurry. Her eyes looked tired. "Scott," she said, stopping at the fence. "You free tonight?" I wiped my hands on a rag. "Depends. If you don't count microwave noodles and washing smoke out of my uniform, then yeah." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Good. Come over for dinner." I paused. Violet had invited me in before. Coffee, soup when I had the flu, once even leftover lasagna, but dinner sounded heavier. "Special occasion?" She looked away. "Not really. I just cook too much. And I could use the company." That last part was what got me. Violet didn't ask for company often. I nodded. "All right, what time?" "7, and wear something decent." I glanced down at my old t-shirt and faded jeans. "Decent by neighbor standards or hospital standards?" She pressed her lips together. "Decent by meeting parents' standards." I should have asked more questions right then. I should have said, "Whose parents?" But I'd gotten used to not pushing Violet when she looked like that. So I said yes. At 7 o'clock, I showed up in a white button-down and dark pants, even shaved properly. I still thought it was just dinner. Maybe her parents had dropped by unexpectedly and she didn't want to sit through it alone. I could handle that. I was good at being the quiet guy in the room. When Violet opened the door, the smell of roasted chicken, garlic butter, and something sweet hit me first. She was wearing a deep green dress that made her look softer than usual. For a second, I forgot how to say hello. "You came," she said. "Yeah, should I have brought something?" "You brought yourself. That's enough." The way she said it made my chest tighten a little. Then I heard voices coming from the dining room. More than one. A lot more than one. Violet reached for my hand. I looked at her. "Violet?" She didn't meet my eyes. "Please, just follow my lead for a minute." Before I could ask what the hell was going on, she pulled me through the short hallway and into the dining room. 5 people sat around the table. Her mother, Margaret, stood up immediately, elegant and sharp-eyed. Her father, Robert, sat at the head, watching me like I was a problem he hadn't decided how to solve yet. Her sister, Megan, smiled like she already knew something I didn't. Her brother-in-law gave me a polite nod. And standing by the sideboard with a glass of red wine in his hand was a tall man in an expensive shirt. He looked at Violet the way people look at something they used to own. Violet's fingers tightened around mine until it almost hurt. Her mother's voice was warm but careful. Violet, sweetheart, you're home. And this is? Violet took a breath. I felt it more than heard it. Then she said, clear and steady, Mom, Dad, this is Scott, my boyfriend. The room went completely silent. I stood there with my hand still locked in Violet's, my brain trying to catch up to what had just happened. 10 minutes ago, I was just the neighbor who fixed things. Now I was suddenly the boyfriend she'd never mentioned. Her mother's eyebrows lifted. Her father set his knife down slowly. The man by the wine, Ryan, I would learn later, smirked like he'd just been handed entertainment for the night. And Violet? Violet kept holding my hand like it was the only solid thing in the room. I had been tricked into coming to dinner. And in less than 30 seconds, I had gone from the guy next door to the man she was supposedly in love with. I didn't know what scared me more, the lie or the fact that part of me didn't want to let go of her hand. The first person to speak was Violet's mother. Margaret Bennett stood there in a cream blouse and pearl earrings, looking at me like she was trying to decide whether I was a surprise or a mistake. She had the same sharp eyes as her daughter, but hers had been sharpened by years of polite disappointment. Boyfriend? She repeated, like the word tasted strange in her mouth. Violet's father, Robert, set his knife down carefully. He didn't say anything at first. He just studied me the way a man studies a loose board on his porch, something that might need fixing or might need replacing. And then there was the man by the sideboard. He took a slow sip of his wine and smiled like someone who already knew the punchline to a joke I hadn't heard yet. Interesting, he said. His voice was smooth, expensive. Violet never mentioned she was seeing anyone. Violet's hand was still locked around mine. I could feel how cold her fingers had gone. Ryan, she said, voice flat. Not everything in my life needs to be announced to you. So that was Ryan. I'd heard the name a few times before, always followed by Violet going quiet for the rest of the evening. Doctor, successful, from a good family. The kind of man her parents probably thought was perfect for her. He looked the part. Tall, confident, the kind of smile that made people want to agree with him. I'd run into burning buildings. I'd carried strangers out of collapsed houses. I'd stayed calm when everything around me was falling apart. But standing in this dining room, pretending to be someone's boyfriend while the real ex-boyfriend watched me like I was an interesting insect, that wasn't in the training manual. I could have ended it right there. I could have let go of Violet's hand and said, "There's been a misunderstanding." I could have walked out and let her deal with the consequences of her own lie, but then her thumb brushed across the back of my hand. Not a command, a plea. So I smiled at her mother. "I'm Scott Walker. It's nice to finally meet you both." Margaret looked at me for another long second, then her polite smile returned. "Well then," she said, "I suppose dinner just got a lot more interesting." Violet let out a breath so quiet, I almost missed it. We sat down next to each other. Under the table, her knee pressed against mine. She started to pull away, but I didn't move. I knew she needed something solid to hold on to. The interrogation began immediately, wrapped in linen napkins and good silverware. "So, Scott," Margaret said, cutting her chicken with surgical precision, "what do you do?" "I'm a firefighter at Station 7, I answered, "mostly rescue and emergency response in this area." A small silence fell over the table. Ryan swirled his wine. "Ah," he said, "a firefighter." The way he said it made it sound like I collected garbage for a living. Violet set her fork down a little too hard. "Scott's very good at what he does. If it weren't for people like him, a lot of families wouldn't get to go home at the end of the day." I turned to look at her. She said it like she meant it, not for show. Robert leaned back in his chair. "How long have you two been together?" Violet hesitated. I answered before she could stumble. "Almost a year, since Violet moved in next door." "Neighbors?" Her sister Megan perked up, eyes bright. "Oh, that's adorable. The classic next-door romance." Violet's cheeks went pink. I shrugged. At first, I was just the guy who changed her light bulbs and checked her smoke detectors. Then she started paying me an apple pie. I have principles, but I'm not made of stone. Megan laughed. Even Robert's mouth twitched. Violet kicked me lightly under the table. The tension eased for a moment, but Ryan wasn't finished. So, how did this little neighbor romance actually start? He asked, smiling, like he was doing us a favor by being curious. It seems sudden. Violet went still beside me. I set my glass down and looked at him. Actually, it wasn't sudden at all. The whole table turned toward me. I looked at Violet. In that second, I didn't know if I was still lying or if I was finally saying things I'd been keeping to myself for months. It started with small things, I said quietly. A broken porch light, a cup of coffee left on my fence. One night, she left a slice of pie on my doorstep because she knew I'd just come off a 24-hour shift. After a while, I realized that every evening when I got home, the first thing I did wasn't unlock my own door. It was check if her porch light was on. Violet stopped breathing. I kept going, voice lower. I realized I missed the sound of her wind chimes. I missed the way she pretended she wasn't tired when she clearly was. I even missed watching her talk to her lavender plants like they were difficult patients. Megan covered her mouth with her hand. Margaret's expression softened. Ryan stopped smiling. Violet stared at me like she was seeing something she hadn't expected. Then, without warning, she reached over and took my hand again, placing it on top of the table for everyone to see. "He left out the most important part," she said. I looked at her. What part? Violet wasn't looking at her family anymore. She was looking straight at me. The part where I liked him first. My heart stumbled. That sentence didn't sound like acting, or maybe Violet was just a better actress than I'd given her credit for. She continued, voice soft but clear. Because he's kind without needing anyone to notice. Because he helps people and then pretends it was nothing. Because when I have a bad day, he doesn't ask 100 questions or give me empty advice. He just stands on his side of the fence and tells me ridiculous stories from the station until I can breathe again. The table had gone completely quiet. I looked at her, throat tight. I had come here to help her survive one dinner. But every word she said was making me wonder if the person who had been fooled all along wasn't her parents. It was me. After the main course, I volunteered to carry the plates into the kitchen. Really, I just needed air. The kitchen was warm and smelled like roasted garlic and lemon. I set the stack of dishes in the sink and braced both hands on the edge of the counter, trying to sort through everything that had just happened in my head. A few seconds later, the door swung shut behind me. Violet. She stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. I turned around. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm really sorry, Scott. I didn't plan to say you were my boyfriend. At least, not like that." "So you were planning to say something?" She closed her eyes. "I was going to tell them you were someone I was seeing. But when I walked in and saw Ryan sitting there and my mother looking at me like I'd failed at life again, I panicked. And your hand was right there. She stopped. I wasn't angry. That was the strangest part. I should have been angry. I should have been pissed that she dragged me into a lie, that she brought me here without warning, that she put me in the middle of her family and her ex like I was some kind of shield. But all I felt was something heavier, something that hurt in a different way. "Ryan's the reason you needed me to come tonight?" Violet nodded. "My mother still thinks he's the right choice for me. Successful, good family, says all the right things. To them, Ryan is safe. They don't know what it actually felt like to be with him." "What did it feel like?" She looked down at the floor. Small, guilty, like my feelings were always an inconvenience. He never hit me, never yelled. He just made me believe that if I was sad, I was too sensitive. If I was tired, I wasn't strong enough. If I wanted to be heard, I was asking for too much. Her voice cracked. I took a step closer, but I kept enough distance that she wouldn't feel cornered. "Violet." "None of them know," she whispered. "Because in front of them, Ryan is perfect. And I'm just the 31-year-old woman who's still single, still living alone, still not settled the way they want me to be." I looked at her. I thought about all the nights she sat on her porch with cold tea, eyes red but still smiling, when I asked if she wanted to hear about the guy who tried to disable his smoke alarm with a butter knife because it kept going off while he was toasting bread. I thought about how she always said she was fine. and how I had almost believed her. The things you said out there, I asked slowly. How much of it was real? Violet lifted her head. The question hung between us. She could have said no. She could have told me it was all acting. She could have pulled everything back to the safe line of just neighbors. But she didn't. Some of it, she whispered, more than I want to admit. My chest tightened. Since when? She gave a small, tired laugh that sounded like it hurt. Maybe since the night you fixed my backyard faucet and stayed for 2 hours drinking coffee with me in the rain? Or the time I had a fever and you left soup on my doorstep with a note that said, "No need to open the door. I know you don't want anyone seeing you look pathetic." Or maybe it was all the afternoons you stood on your side of the fence pretending you were just passing by. I couldn't speak. Violet took one small step closer. I tried not to like you, she said, because you're my neighbor. Because if this went wrong, I'd still have to see your house every single morning. Because I was scared of needing someone again and finding out I needed the wrong person. And tonight? Tonight I was selfish? She smiled, but it was shaky. I pulled you into my mess. I made you face my family. I used you to hide from Ryan. No. She stopped. I looked at her for a long moment. You asked me to be your shield. But what I said out there wasn't fake either. Violet's eyes filled. Scott. I don't know when it started, I said. Maybe it was when I realized I was fixing your fence more carefully than mine. Maybe it was when I started buying the coffee you like even though you only come over sometimes. Maybe it was every time I heard your car pull into the driveway after a night shift and felt something loosen in my chest because I knew you were home safe. Violet stood very still. I kept going. I thought it was just being a good neighbor. And now? I looked down at her hand. Now I'm not sure I can keep lying to myself. The kitchen was quiet. The space between us had shrunk to almost nothing. Violet looked at my mouth, quick, but long enough for me to notice. I lifted my hand slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. My fingers brushed her cheek. I was about to say something. Maybe we should slow down. Maybe this isn't the right time. Maybe something responsible and careful. But right then, the kitchen door swung open. Megan stood there holding an empty wine glass, eyes bright with curiosity. Oh, she said. Sorry, I was just looking for the corkscrew, but it looks like you two are busy staring at each other like it's a Hallmark movie for adults. Violet yanked her hand back. Megan! Her sister shrugged. I'm rooting for you, by the way. Scott's definitely an upgrade from Ryan. Ryan has the energy of a man who wears loafers without socks. I almost laughed. Violet covered her face. Megan started backing out, but before the door closed, she added one more thing. Oh, and Ryan just brought up Boston. Violet went pale, and just like that, I understood. The night wasn't over yet. When we walked back into the dining room, the air had changed. Ryan was leaning back in his chair like he'd just played a winning card. Margaret was watching Violet with that careful, worried expression mothers wear when they think their daughter is making another mistake. Robert sat quietly, but his eyes had lost some of their sharpness. I didn't ask what was coming. I just sat down beside Violet and placed my hand on the table, close enough that if she needed it, she could reach for me. She did. Ryan spoke first, voice smooth and almost kind. I was just surprised, that's all. If you two are serious, I think Scott deserves to know that Violet was offered a position in Boston last year. A very good one. Higher salary, bigger hospital. She turned it down. Margaret sighed. It was a rare opportunity. I still don't understand why she let it go. Robert added quietly, We just want what's best for you, Violet. Violet's hand trembled slightly in mine. Ryan continued, still smiling. I always assumed she was afraid of change. She chose to stay here because everything was comfortable. Familiar job, familiar neighborhood, familiar neighbors. He looked at me when he said that last word. I met his eyes without blinking. Violet took a slow breath. I'm not afraid of change, she said. Ryan tilted his head. Then why? Margaret looked at her daughter, equal parts concerned and expectant. Violet, Ryan is only trying to help. So are we. Violet set her napkin down. No, she said. You all want a version of me that's easier for you to manage. The table went silent. Violet's voice was steady, but I could hear the years of holding back underneath it. Boston was a good job, but I didn't want it. I didn't want to leave the hospital I'm at now. I didn't want to walk away from the kids I've been taking care of for 3 years. I didn't want to move to a city just because it sounds impressive when Mom tells her friends. Margaret looked stunned. Violet turned to Ryan. And I didn't reject Boston because I was scared of change. I rejected it because you were there. Because I knew if I moved, I would end up right back in your orbit. Listening to you tell me what was good for me, who was good for me, how I should live so I could look more successful. Ryan set his glass down carefully. Violet, you're being dramatic. She looked straight at him. That's what you always say. When I tell the truth, you say I'm dramatic. When I'm hurting, you say I'm too sensitive. When I don't want to follow your plan, you say I'm not mature enough. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. It took me a long time to understand that love shouldn't make you feel like you have to apologize for who you are. Megan sat very still. Robert's face had changed completely. Margaret's hand had risen to her mouth. I didn't say a word. This was Violet's fight. She didn't need me to save her, she just needed to know she wasn't standing alone. And then she reached for my hand again. Not for show, to steady herself. I stayed here because I want this life, she said. This house, this job. Quiet mornings, the low wooden fence between 2 yards. A man who doesn't make me feel like I'm difficult to love. I turned to look at her. Violet wasn't looking at me, but her fingers were gripping mine tightly. Ryan stood up. I think I should go. No one stopped him. Before he left the room, he looked at me one last time. Good luck. She's more complicated than she looks. I answered calmly. I know. That's one of the things I like about her. Ryan paused for a second, then walked out. After the front door closed, the room felt heavy. Margaret was the first to speak. Violet, I didn't know you felt that way. Violet gave a small, tired smile. Because every time I tried to tell you, everyone said Ryan was just being caring. Robert let out a long breath. I'm sorry, he said. Just those 2 words. But Violet froze like she never expected to hear them. The rest of dinner was quiet. No more questions, no more tests. Just dessert eaten too fast and awkward apologies that came too late. When we finally stepped outside, it had started to rain. Margaret hugged Violet longer than usual. Then she looked at me. Thank you for being there for her tonight. Violet immediately said, Mom, I don't need anyone taking care of me like I'm a child. Margaret nodded, eyes red. I know. But if someone makes your life a little easier to breathe in, I'll learn to be grateful instead of controlling. Violet didn't answer. I saw her eyes shine. We walked down the path between our 2 houses. The rain was light, almost gentle. Her porch light was on, mine was too. The wind chime made its soft, tired sound. Violet stopped halfway between the 2 porches. I'm sorry about tonight, she said. I turned to her. You already apologized. Not enough. Then how long are you planning to keep apologizing? She looked up at me, voice smaller. Until you stop looking at me like everything has changed. I stepped closer. But everything has changed. She swallowed. For the worse? I looked at her house, then at mine. 2 porches, 1 low fence, a year of things we never said. No, I said. Just that I don't know how to pretend tomorrow morning when I see you watering your flowers on the other side of the fence. Violet laughed softly, but her eyes were still wet. You don't have to pretend. I reached out and touched her cheek. She leaned into my hand without hesitation, then I kissed her. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't desperate. It was slow, careful, and a little shaky, like 2 people who had stood on opposite sides of a fence for too long and finally found the gate. When we pulled apart, Violet rested her forehead against my chest. Tomorrow's going to feel really strange, she whispered. Yeah. We're still neighbors. Yeah. What if this breaks? I looked down at her. Then we go slow. We don't turn one chaotic night into a lifetime promise, but we also don't pretend that kiss never happened. Violet was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. Tomorrow, a real date? I smiled. No parents, no Ryan, no interrogation dinner. No lying? No lying. She looked up at me. So you'll come over at 7? I laughed. Are you going to introduce me as your almost husband this time? Violet smiled for real. Depends on how you behave. The next morning, I saw Violet at the fence. She was wearing an oversized sweater, hair loosely tied back, holding a watering can. She looked like herself again. Not the woman in the green dress from last night, but the neighbor I'd known for a year. Only everything felt different now. I stood on my side with a cup of coffee. "Morning, neighbor," she said. "Morning, fake girlfriend." She raised an eyebrow. "Fake?" I took a sip. "We'll reassess after our actual date tonight." Violet laughed and tossed a dry leaf over the fence at me. Our first real date was simple. No fancy restaurant, no pressure. I took her to the weekend market by the river. Fresh bread, handmade coffee, and an old man playing violin slightly off-key. Violet bought me a keychain shaped like a firefighter helmet because you need reminding that you don't always have to run into burning buildings alone. I bought her a small lavender plant. "You already have a whole garden of lavender," she said. "This one's from my side of the yard." She looked at me. "Why?" "So, even if you don't come over, I still have something of yours at my house." Violet didn't speak for a long time. Then she kissed me right there in the middle of the market in front of the honey stall with no audience and no reason except that she wanted to. After that, we took it slow, exactly like we promised. We still lived in our separate houses. We still saw each other across the fence every morning. She still came over with soup after my long shifts, and I still found excuses to fix things at her place that didn't really need fixing. But now, when she fell asleep on my couch after a double shift at the hospital, I didn't sit there frozen, afraid of wanting too much. I could pull a blanket over her, kiss her forehead, and listen to her mumble, "Stay a little longer." And I stayed. A month later, Violet invited me to dinner with her family again. This time, she told them in advance. "No surprises," she said. "No lying, no Ryan." I wore the same white shirt from that first night. Violet met me at her front porch. "You know," she said quietly, "the first time I pulled you into that dinner, I only thought I needed someone to stand beside me. And now?" She took my hand. "Now I want you beside me." The second family dinner was completely different. Margaret didn't interrogate me about 5-year plans. Robert asked about my shifts at the station, then casually mentioned his garage roof had a small leak and wondered if I could take a look sometime. Megan raised her glass and toasted, the couple who lied about their introduction but somehow ended up legitimate anyway. Violet turned red. I laughed. After dinner, Margaret pulled Violet into the kitchen for a private talk. I ended up in the backyard with Robert, who handed me a rake without saying much at first. "This a disguised interrogation?" I asked. He glanced at me. "You talk more than I expected." "I talk when I'm nervous." He gave a small smile. We raked leaves in silence for a while, then he said, "She looks lighter when she's with you." I looked through the kitchen window. Violet was standing with her mother and sister, towel in hand, head tilted as she laughed. The warm light fell across her face. "She makes me feel that way too," I said. Robert nodded. "Then don't lose it." I looked at him. "I won't just try," I answered. "I'll learn. We've both been hurt before. Kind people don't automatically know how to love right. We have to learn." He didn't say anything else, but he clapped a hand on my shoulder before we went back inside. Winter came. Then spring. Our two houses stayed side by side, but the fence between our yards slowly stopped feeling like a boundary and started feeling like the place we met every morning. Violet planted more lavender on my side. I repaired her front steps. She left a mug with her name on it in my kitchen. I kept a jacket at her house because she always forgot to wear enough layers. Some evenings we didn't talk much. We just sat on our separate porches, hands touching across the fence, listening to the wind chimes and distant traffic. But the silence wasn't lonely anymore. It had someone in it. One year after the night Violet introduced me as her boyfriend before I had agreed to be one, she organized a small dinner in her backyard. No big family, no exes, just the two of us. 2 plates of pasta, a cheap bottle of wine, and string lights I helped her hang along the fence. That's when I noticed the gate between our yards had been repainted. A soft blue. And on it hung a small wooden sign. "Path to Boyfriend's House." I looked at her. Real boyfriend or fake? Violet stood under the lights, hair moving gently in the breeze. Do you still need to evaluate? I stepped forward and pulled her into my arms. Maybe I need more evidence. She placed her hand on my chest. I love you, Scott. It was the first time she said it. Not in panic, not in front of her family, not as a weapon against Ryan, just her in her own backyard, telling the man next door that she had chosen him. I kissed her. I love you too, Violet. She smiled against my mouth. Good, because I already told my mother that next year you might not just be my boyfriend anymore. I froze. Violet. She laughed, the real laugh, the one I'd fallen for through a wooden fence a year ago. And for the first time since that chaotic dinner, I didn't feel tricked. I just felt like I had finally come home.